awakened, feeling the damp weight of the coarse fabric pressed against your face. The breath caught behind the polished, cold wooden mask, unyielding against your tired skin. The stagnant air of the low chamber smelled faintly of burnt incense and aged wood, while the tight leather of the costume rubbed continuously against your shoulders and wrists, reminding you of the rigidity, forcing you to remain still for hours. Your numb fingers moved in an automatic ritual, smoothing the folds of the heavy garment again and again, as the distant drumbeat echoed steadily, marking the slow, exhausting cycle of the approaching performance. Every step had to be measured, present, despite the cold sweat trickling beneath the mask, and the silent oppression suffocating your thoughts. The sweat mingled with the strong scent of dark wood, and the discomfort grew with each calculated motion, bringing forth the solemnity and hidden fear beneath the stern tradition. Your mind focused on the long wait until the moment to step onto the stage, where the mask would no longer only hide your face, but might become your silent sentence in a world where the slightest mistake could mean the end. Did you ever imagine being trapped within something so unyielding, where every breath is weighed and every movement shackled? In this feudal Japan, among the ancient no-actors, your confinement was both shield and prison. The mask, carved with noise, dominate. You moved at a deliberate snail's pace, your stillness heavier than the thick fabric weighing you down. Unlike the restless tapping of a modern waiting line or the flicker of impatience at a traffic light, the chamber's dimness wrapped around you in muted grays and browns, the wood grain worn smooth beneath rough fingers. The air was thick but still, warmed slightly by your body heat. You settled into the repetitive task of adjusting the folds of the attire once more. The silk layers, heavy and binding, your fingertips tracing the textures as if committing the fabric's every wrinkle to memory. The rhythmic beat of the drum outside was steady, a metronome to your slow, measured breathing. Occasionally, a faint breeze slipped past a crack in the wooden lattice, carrying with it a hint of sandalwood incense. A fleeting soft caress on your heated skin that lightened the oppressive quiet for a moment. The sound of your own heart echoed softly inside the mask, steady and unrelenting, matching the slow tick of passing time. Suddenly, the muted murmur among the gathered moved like a shadow, a silencing hush dropping over the chamber. You sensed the change before seeing it, a collective intake of breath, the subtle shift in air, as if the walls themselves leaned closer. The drumbeat faltered briefly, an uncertain pause filled with something unspoken, a tension folding tightly around your lungs. The moment stretched thin, fragile and waiting, and your fingers froze mid-gesture as the quiet deepened. Before Morpheus claims you utterly, take a moment to check if you're still subscribed. Some have found the button vanished, and I want to make sure you don't miss the gentle stories ahead. Leave a pillow soft like to ease you deeper, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what hour is it there? Your presence keeps this corner of calm alive. Thanks for being part of this tranquil journey. You blinked slowly, the dim light pressing through the cracks in the wooden lattice, casting long, trembling shadows across your confined chamber. The faint scent of sandalwood lingered, mingling with the harsh tang of sweat and aged timber. Your breath, muffled beneath the cold mask, echoed softly as you shifted the weight of your bound arms, feeling the stubborn resistance of the stiff leather sleeves against your skin. Every movement was a careful negotiation between necessity and restraint. The costume's oppressive fabric crept into the small spaces of your body, reminding you of the price of this ritual's perfection. Outside, the drumbeat resumed, a slow, deliberate pulse that seemed to mark the passing of time as mercilessly as the clouds drifting past the moon beyond the papered windows. You heard the soft shuffle of footsteps, distant and ghostly, walking the corridors with steady purpose. The walls themselves seemed to breathe with an ancient patience, wood grain groaning quietly under unseen weight, as if the entire house awaited the final cue. Your fingers, though numb, found themselves tracing the same ritual grooves along the folds of your costume, smoothing the silk with a familiarity born of countless rehearsals. The coarse fabric beneath your fingertips was rough at first, then softened by wear and time. Like the bark of a weathered tree, you felt the subtle tears and stitches. Invisible to the eye, each imperfection a mark of history, the silent stories woven into just this one garment. A draft whispered through the narrow crack near the floor, carrying with it the faintest hint of rain, wet earth, and distant thunder. The pulse of the drumbeat grew steadier, more insistent. You turned your head slightly, feeling the mask's unforgiving edge press unyieldingly against your cheek. The metallic coldness sent a faint shiver through your body, but you dared not move more than necessary. The silence around you was heavy, thick with anticipation, as if the very space held its breath with you. With painstaking slowness, you lifted your right foot and set it before you, feeling the weight shift unevenly beneath the layered folds hiding your every action. The floorboards creaked ever so softly under your careful step, a sharp contrast to the near stillness surrounding you. Your heart's quiet thump reverberated inside the mask, matching the rhythm of the drum outside, a metronome to your fragile resolve. The faint rustle of fabric blended with your breath, shallow and measured, a sacred chant of endurance. You moved again, this time raising your arms just a fraction, adjusting the leather cuffs which bit ever so slightly into your wrists. The scent of burnt incense grew stronger, weaving into the dampness of the room, a ghostly warmth that wrapped around you for a fleeting moment amid the relentless cold of confinement. Your skin tingled where the mask's edge met your jaw, raw from hours of pressure. You closed your eyes briefly, imagining the pale light spilling over a quiet garden, its delicate flowers nodding gently in the breeze. Far from the weight and darkness pressing down on you now. Outside the chamber, the murmurs began, a low tide of whispers carried on the air, rolling through the corridors like a secret tide. You could feel the gaze of unseen figures falling upon this small space, waiting, watching, the unspoken questions pressing against your lungs like soft stones. Your body froze, senses sharpening as the quiet tension built, the drumbeat faltering for just one moment, as if the world paused to listen. You returned your hands to the folds of your garment, smoothing again, as if to calm the restless threads that threatened to unravel beneath the strain. The faint light flickered as a candle wavered somewhere nearby, casting a slow dance of shadows that played gently on the walls. You caught the smell of something new. A faint bitterness, sharp and clean, like crushed leaves in morning dew. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door beside you creaked open just an inch, stirring the stillness. A narrow shaft of pale light sliced through the darkness, striking the floor before you. Your breath caught under the mask, a soft pulse of fear threading through the ritual calm. Time seemed to stretch thin once more, like delicate paper pulled taut. The scent of sandalwood mingled now with the sharpness of cold metal, and a slight chill swept the chamber as the door whispered closed again. The drumbeat resumed, dragging you back into its slow, unyielding rhythm. Each moment felt stretched, fragile, as if one careless breath could shatter the delicate balance you clung to. The woven shadows at the edge of your vision thickened suddenly, and you sensed something distant yet near, a presence not quite visible, but pressing into your awareness. The leather against your skin tightened, the mask feeling heavier still, its polished surface like an unblinking eye recording your every heartbeat. Your fingers trembled faintly as you smoothed the costume's folds one last time, your body poised on the cusp of movement and stillness. The whispered breath of the room seemed to murmur a warning, a soft brush of wind through ancient trees far beyond these walls. The final echo of the drum faded into silence, and the darkness closed in around you like a secret held too long. Then, a voice, just a breath, whispered from the shadows behind the door. A single word that sent the cold air racing through your veins. Now. The door closed with a soft yet resolute thud, the echo of its closure folding into the dense shadows pressing against your senses. You remain still, every part of your body taut, held in place by the unyielding layers cocooning you from the world outside. Your breath, captured and slowed beneath the cold mask, surged with a quiet urgency, each intake deliberate, a fragile thread anchoring you to the present moment. Time unraveled itself in slow motion, seconds dripping like thick sap from an ancient tree, as the drumbeat resumed its relentless pulse. Your fingers traced the worn silk folds again, the texture familiar, comfort woven into the very fibers, despite the strain that compressed your chest. The dense scent of sandalwood embraced you once more, mingling with the faint bitterness of rain still hovering beyond the cracked lattice. The damp chill curled at your nape, an ever-present reminder of the night's wait. Outside, distant footsteps faded into a rhythm, hollow and deliberate, as if the house itself was holding its breath for what was yet to come. A shallow shiver traveled down your spine, despite the thick layers holding you firm. You adjusted your posture with the slow care of someone moving within a fragile shell, aware that any sudden motion might betray your presence. The leather sleeves bit beneath your fingers, a sharp but muted pressure that anchored your limbs, limiting freedom but sharpening focus. Each second stretched like a silent song, notes of confinement and ritual intertwined as your mind slipped further into the ebb of waiting. The faint flicker of candlelight wavered nearby, casting long, sinuous shadows on the wooden walls. You could feel the walls pressing inward, the grain of the wood, a silent witness to centuries of quiet performances and whispered secrets. The drumbeat softened in tempo, becoming a slow, pulsating hum that resonated in your chest. Every tiny creak of the floor beneath your shifting feet echoed like a trembling breath, a reminder of the thin line between this suspended moment and the unfolding ritual beyond the chamber. Your focus drifted to the mask, cold and unyielding, its carved edges pressing mercilessly against your skin. You swallowed the lump in your throat, the metal's chill a ghostly caress igniting a faint ache along your jaw. Slowly, your hand brushed the edge, fingertips trembling against the polished surface, tracing the silent history carved into the wood. A quiet surge of anticipation bloomed in your chest, mingled with a night's worth of silent fears and disciplined resolve. Outside, a soft murmur climbed, barely carried by the still air, a gentle tide of voices falling away as quickly as they came. The chamber seemed to pulse with the collective breath of unseen watchers, their presence dense yet intangible. The subtle scent of fresh pine wove in around the heavier incense, sharp and bright, a fleeting promise of clarity amid the lingering shadows. Your heart pulsed in a tentative crescendo beneath the mask, each beat a cautious drum, marking the edge between presence and surrender. You shifted your weight minutely, the floorboard beneath your foot creaking a fragile note in the room's silence. The leather cuffs gave a faint resistance as you flexed your wrists with painstaking care, the sensation sharp with constraint. The rich hum of the drum deepened once more, the rhythm steady but deliberate and audible. Thread, stitching together moments, sprawling across the night's eternal canvas. You felt the faintest draft creep beneath the sliding wooden panels, carrying with it the cool breath of approaching rain. The scent of wet earth swelled, damp and primal. It mingled with the fading amber glow of incense, a slow dance of scents, pulling you deeper into the waiting. Your skin prickled where the mask and garment kissed tender flesh, raw from hours of pressure. But that ache now felt less like pain and more like an anchor, grounding you in this suspended reality. Your fingers, still restless, found the folds once more, smoothing the fabric with a rhythm born of deep necessity. This time, your hand lingered, coaxing the silk, your touch both reverent and weary. A whispered breath, barely audible, seemed to flutter through the room, catching lightly on your skin like the fleeting brush of a ghost's fingertips. The shadows stretched longer, aquatic and silent, settling around you as if to enfold your very being in the night's embrace. A flicker from the doorway, faint, almost mistaken for a trick of the eye, broke your trance. The panel shifted another fraction of an inch, surrendering a sliver of darkness deeper into the chamber. You inhaled sharply, the cold metal pressing tighter against your face as the presence beyond the threshold edged closer, silent, calculating. The drumbeat held steady, an imperceptible thread binding this moment to what was still to come. Your heart thudded with fragile certainty, the mask feeling suddenly heavier, a leaden weight that settled over your thoughts and breath. A soft crescendo of movement brushed just beyond hearing, the rustle of garments, the scent of earth and old wood merged with a whisper of iron. The room seemed to contract, the air thickening as though the walls themselves were listening, waiting. You squeezed your eyes shut briefly, imagining the gentle sway of bamboo leaves far beyond these walls, the faint rustle of wind carrying away the unspoken dread that laced the heavy night air. But the moment was fleeting, slipping away like sand through clenched fingers. Your breath stalled just as a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness, a figure poised at the threshold. The mask's cold edge bit into your skin as breath hung frozen, and a single word, low and deadly soft, brushed the silent air again. Now. You opened your eyes, heart thrumming in your throat, poised between the final stillness and the motion that would change everything. The word now lingered in the suffocating air, a soft yet sharp cut through the stillness pressing down on your shoulders. Your breath hitched beneath the cold mask, a fragile whirlwind caught in the narrow cage of wood and leather. Every muscle in your body frozen, taut as a drawn bowstring, waiting for some imperceptible moment to unravel this suspended silence. The door's shadowed frame held something beyond the edge of your vision, an absence filled with again. Slower now, more deliberate, each strike a heavy footfall, marking the slow crawl of time. You felt it resonate in your chest, shaping the beat of your own heart, anchoring you to this uneasy moment. The lingering scent of burned incense curled around you like a fragile thread, twisting with the richer smell of wet earth carried through the thin crack near the floor. The room seemed to breathe around you, exhaling ancient secrets in a language only shadows could speak. A flicker of movement teased the thresholds of shadow, not bold, but persistent. You sensed hesitant footsteps, feather-light and deliberate, navigating the threshold between darkness and the dim lantern glow beyond. The careful scrape of fabric on wood whispered against the stillness, and your sharpened senses ached, drinking in every echo, every texture layered in the cool night air. Your fingers instinctively sought the folds of your costume again, tracing the worn silk with the tenderness of remembrance, smoothing the creases as if willing them into obedience. The heavy layers pressed in around your ribs, pulling tight. But your mind reached beyond the constraints, seeking clarity in the fading candlelight, dancing along the walls. Shadows flickered like restless spirits, swaying gently in tandem with your breath, joined by the soft rustling of leaves carried faintly on a faraway breeze. You dared to tilt your head a fraction, sensing the cool bite of the carved mask edging closer against your skin, its polished surface cold as riverstone. The familiar pressure grounded you, a painful clarity amidst the quiet chaos. Your breath echoed softly, a slow rhythm matching the haunting pulse of the drum. Each inhalation, a whispered pact of endurance beneath the mask that bound your identity with silent resolve. More footsteps stirred beyond the chamber's walls, a measured rhythm, deliberate yet tentative, as if each footfall weighed on invisible scales. The air thickened with expectation, vibrating quietly beneath the worn beams overhead. The ancient wood whispered beneath the faint vibrations, a long-held breath shared by all who had waited in this space before you. The smell of damp moss seeped through the lattice cracks, mingling with the lingering sharpness of sandalwood. It was a delicate balance, earthy and familiar, like the scent of a distant forest after a sudden rain. You imagined the taste of that cool moisture coating your tongue, cleansed of all fear and burden, even if only for a suspended moment. Slowly, impossibly slow, you shifted the weight from one foot to the other, mindful of the floorboards that groaned with the ghostly whisper of age. The leather cuff on your wrist dug quietly into your skin, a bite sharpened by hours of restraint. You flexed your fingers cautiously, feeling the numbness ebb and flow beneath the layers. Time stretched like a thread pulling taut, each micro-movement mapped in painstaking detail by your senses. From somewhere beyond the heavy door, a faint breath, barely a gust, caressed the edges of the chamber. The fragile sound carried the promise of change, a subtle disruption in the veil of stasis. A dull ache blossomed behind your eyes, the weight of breathless waiting pressing deeper into your bones. You turned your head just a fraction, cautious not to betray any sudden motion, to catch a glimpse through the narrowing crack. The light beyond the door shifted, casting a sliver of pale gold across the floor, spreading like spilled honey, pooling slowly onto dark wood. It moved, creeping forward in a patient tide, and you felt the cold encroach anew, threading along your spine, tugging whispers of fear unbidden. Yet no flash of panic arose, only a serene surrender to the ritual's slow, consuming certainty. Your mind drifted briefly to distant memories, a gentle sway of rice paddies beneath twilight skies, the faint laughter carried on a wind that seemed to forget the weight of your confinement. You imagined the fragile warmth of a cottage hearth, its glow barely touching the stone hearth, offering soft comfort in shadowed corners. The thought warmed your chest, a fleeting ember of light, swallowed quickly by the ever-thickening dusk around you. The room contracted once more, as the door's edge shifted again, imperceptibly, letting a new scent rule the air. A sharp tang of iron, mingled with the deep musk of ancient wood soaked in rain. Your heart beat faster, caught between slow exultation and silent dread. The polished mask felt impossibly heavy, the cold steel rim pressing insistently against your cheekbone, biting like a promise you could neither keep nor deny. A flutter of fabric brushed beyond the threshold, a sound so soft that it might have been a trick of the wind, or the hint of a shadow stepping forward from memory. The drumbeat slowed, each strike trembling like a leaf caught in a waiting storm. Your body tensed, poised on the brink of impossible movement and eternal stillness. The weight of the moment pressed upon you, an ocean of silence, waiting to swallow all sound. The voice from before haunted the darkness again, no stronger than a breath, but impossibly sharp. Now. You swallowed the dry pulse rising in your throat, eyes fixed beyond the shadowed door where something waited, something patient, almost reverent, ready to cross the threshold that would undo everything you were and become more than you dared imagine. The door's dull thud settled into the air, wrapping the chamber once again in a dense, expectant silence that pressed against your skin like a thick fog. Your heart pulsed faintly beneath the polished mask, each beat a slow, deliberate echo that tangled with the resumed drum outside. Time stretched unevenly, dragging moments into a heavy current you had no choice but to drift within. Your breath, shallow and measured beneath the wooden cage, tasted faintly of smoke and damp earth, an earthy bitterness that clung stubbornly to your tongue. Your fingers, numb yet insistently alive, sought the familiar folds of your costume once more, laying the heavy silk flat with a meticulousness born of necessity rather than choice. The coarse weave scratched with every movement, a silent reminder of the layers binding you, just as surely as the mask pressed cold and unyielding against your face. Each touch traced familiar stories, threadbare patches, and tiny tears sewn together with invisible care. A map of past ceremonies echoed in the ritual now consuming your night. A cold draft slipped beneath the sliding lattice, carrying a delicate blend of sandalwood and freshly fallen rain. The scent was soft, a gentle caress against the rough texture of leather and cloth, momentarily lightening the pressing weight that settled over your shoulders. Somewhere beyond the wooden walls, a faint creak whispered through the darkness, like the house itself, exhaling in slow, careful communion with the approaching moment. With painstaking slowness, you shifted your weight, feeling the floorboards groan softly underfoot, their aged wood vibrating through the soles of your sandals. The mask's rigid edge bit sharply at your cheek, sending a shiver rippling down your spine. But you dared not adjust more than the barest inch. Stillness was your silent pact, a fragile line between control and surrender, aching against the heat pooling beneath your skin. The soft murmur of voices drifted faintly outside the door, a gathering tide of whispers blending into the distant drumbeat, now a slow, steady pulse, like the measured breathing of some vast, slumbering beast. Your mind clung to each sound, each scent, the bitter tang of iron mingled with earth and the lingering incense, the faint cracking of candle wax melting somewhere nearby. Your senses stretched taut, mapping every faint vibration with a reverent attentiveness. You lifted your hands slowly, fingertips touching the edge of the mask. The surface was smooth and cold as river stone, the polished wood carved with lines that caught the faintest light like whispers of forgotten stories. Your breath hitched softly, a fragile rise and fall beneath the mask's sealed cage. The pressing silence around you seemed to thicken, grinding every sound to a softened edge, where shadow and light blended like smoke curled in slow spirals. The floor creaked again beneath your toe, a brittle note in the cavernous quiet. Your mind unraveled lightly, glimpsing beyond the confinement. The gentle sway of bamboo leaves just beyond the lattice, the faint stir of a midnight breeze brushing through tall grass. That small, fragile memory blossomed briefly, like a forgotten flower, a shard of warmth swallowed quickly by the shadows clutching the room. Another breath came, low and tentative, skimming the edges of the door. A pinprick of movement slipped through the narrowing crack, silent and precise. The space seemed to constrict, the wooden beams leaning in with centuries of patience, a slow pulse twining into your bones. Your arms, bound and encased in stiff leather, felt the tightness sharpened for a moment, stretching every fiber of will into a razor's edge. You trace the costume's folds again, the fabric whispering ancient secrets with each deliberate stroke. The worn silk held the residue of countless nights like this one, a blend of fear, reverence, and unspoken stories stitched into its very threads. The scent enveloping you softened, touched by the wet musk of moss, mingling with the harsh brightness of incense smoke, lingering like a fading hymn. A breath, barely more than a sigh, brushed along the floor, reckless in its gentleness. The door shifted a fraction, casting long, hesitant shadows that stretched and recoiled like restless spirits. Your heart moved suddenly, a stuttering chord thrown into the deep silence as the drumbeat subdued, each strike now fragile and slow, a fragile tether woven into the night's thick fabric. The mask's cold edge dug deeper with a quiet insistence, sharpening the ache along your cheekbone, as if carving a silent mark. Your lips parted slightly inside the cage, tasting the stale warmth of labored breath. The faint salt of sweat mingled with the bitterness of earth and pine. Outside, the murmurs folded and unraveled like wind through chimes, distant and disembodied, carried on currents that barely disturbed the still air. You let your eyes close, retreating briefly into the soft memory of rain falling soundlessly on ancient leaves, a soothing counterpoint to the tight coil of expectation suffusing the chamber. The silk beneath your hands felt cooler now, the folds slipping slowly through your fingers, like minutes stretching into eternity. The leather cuffs nestled tightly, biting softly as they promised restraint and focus in the same slow breath. A sudden, subtle shift in the room pulled your senses outward again. A sliver of shadow detached itself from the murk beyond the door. The scent of cold metal grew stronger, sharper, a lean breath of iron mingling with the wood's ancient musk. Your body tensed, muscles taut beneath layers, suspended in the delicate balance between arrest and motion. Then, almost unbearably soft, a single word floated through the darkness, thin as a razor's edge. Now. The syllable echoed around you, lingering in the tight chamber like the ghost of a whispered threat. Your breath faltered, caught in the fragile cage of the mask, as the weight of that single command sank deep, threading tension through every nerve and fiber. Time seemed to slow further, bending toward the cusp of change. Outside, footsteps pressed forward, deliberate and unhurried, a slow tide advancing beneath the veil of silence. The shadows deepened and shifted, swallowing the faint glow of candlelight, as if the night itself inhaled sharply before a plunge. You felt the world tilt ever so slightly, the cold mask anchoring your gaze forward. The polished wood, a silent witness, as something impossible, crossed the threshold, waiting just beyond the edge of breath and darkness. The soft click of the door's final seal faded, folding the chamber back into dense quiet, pressing against your skin like the weight of a slow-moving shadow. Your breath, shallow and deliberate, beneath the lacquered mask, tasted faintly of smoke mingled with damp earth, a bitter tang you had become painfully familiar with. The cold wood biting gently at your cheek, grounding you amid the sea of stillness. Your fingers sought the worn silk folds again, tracing the heavy fabric's faint wrinkles, each one a silent testament to countless rituals endured. The coarse threads whispered stories of time, of countless nights thrumming. With anticipation and lingering dread woven into the very garment that now confined you. Slowly, deliberately, you smoothed the creased texture beneath your palm, the small motions of fragile anchor amid the tightening silence. The faint scent of sandalwood and moist pine curled through the narrow crack near the floor, carrying with it the hidden breath of rain that painted the world outside in muted grays. A scratch, delicate as a spider's footfall, stirred in the wooden floorboards, blending with distant footsteps, threading softly through the corridors. They wove a rhythm, slow and measured, matching the reverberating drum's steady pulse that throbbed more insistently in your chest. A cold shiver traced your spine, where the mask's edge pressed cruelly, sending waves of sharp awareness against the dull ache born of long confinement. You dared not move more than the barest fraction, careful as a shadow slipping through twilight. The leather cuffs binding your wrists bit gently, the stiff resistance grounding your limbs in weary restraint. The muted luminescence of a candle wavered somewhere beyond the lattice, filtering faint gold onto the dark wood, casting trembling shadows that danced like whispered ghosts on the walls. Your breath, slow and purposeful, rose and fell in tempo with the ancient drumbeat, a sacred cadence anchoring you, even as the world seemed to hold its breath. Your thoughts traced a fragile line to distant memories, a garden bathed in soft moonlight, its petals nodding in a warm breeze, the scent of wet soil rising from the earth after a quiet rain. For a moment, the dense fabric and unforgiving mask slipped away, replaced by the gentle, rocking calm of those imagined leaves. But the weight around your ribs tightened again, pulling you back. Outside the door, a hushed murmur rose and folded into silence, like a tide retreating from the shore. Sightless eyes pressed invisibly against the barrier, waiting. The scent of iron sharpened faintly in the air, intertwining with the familiar burn of incense and the damp musk of old wood soaked in twilight. The faintest rustle of fabric, that edge between sound and shadow, made your heart thud, a deep drum resonating inside the cage of your ribs. Your fingers returned to their ritual tracing, skimming the folds with slow reverence. Every small detail was a story beneath your skin, the worn patches, the delicate stitches, markers of survival and silent endurance. The mask, cold as riverstone, bit deeper now, the polished wood pressing sharp against the curve of your cheekbone, a persistent sting written into your flesh. The slow creak of a floorboard sounded beneath your careful weight shift, a brittle note slicing through the thickness of the night. You balanced the heaviness of your bound body with painstaking grace, flexing fingers numbed from long confinement. A tremor fluttered in your chest, a ripple in the ocean of restraint. The air shifted again, pulled thinner, stretched taut between patience and release. A slender slice of pale gold sliced through the crack beside the door, hesitant yet insistent. It stretched and pooled, unwinding like spilled honey over ancient wood planks. Wherever it fell, shadows recoiled, drawing tight and silent. The subtle wetness of earth after rain filled your nostrils, held briefly in a taut breath. One heartbeat merged into another. Your lips parted slowly, tasting the stale warmth of breath trapped beneath the mask. The faint salt of perspiration mingled with that deep, musky scent of pine needle and smoke, a quiet hymn wafting in the stillness. From beyond the chamber, slow, deliberate steps crossed thresholds of shadow and narrow lamplight, a procession carried in whispers. The fabric's ghostly rustle wove alongside them, the near-silent promise of change. Your mind briefly sought refuge in the distant sway of bamboo leaves, the gentle murmur carried on midnight's breath. The soft rustling calmed the sharp edges crowding your vision as you concentrated on the slow pulse beneath your ribs, a metronome steady and unyielding. Cautiously, almost imperceptibly, you shifted weight again. The leather cuffs constricted softly, a reminder of your body's slow imprisonment. Your hands, drawn to the timeless folds, smoothed once more the fabric's texture, closer now to the edge of endurance. Both body and soul pulled taut like a bowstring ready to snap. The faintest movement whispered from the darkened doorway, a shadow breaking away from deeper obscurity. A cold breath of iron mingled with musk of saturated wood filled the chamber, sharp and raw. Your muscles tightened beneath the shrouding garment, every fiber alive and alert. Then, that fragile sound came again, barely a breath, yet razor-edged. Now the word hung like a crystal poised to fracture, a shard of tension slicing time itself. Your breath caught and held, trapped in the narrow cage of mask and leather, as the world tipped on the brink of unfolding change. Beyond the door, footsteps gathered force, a slow tide pressing forward, beneath a veil of silence, swallowing the glow of flickering candlelight. The shadow deepened, reaching into the fragile light, a presence crossing the threshold between quiet and storm. In that crushing stillness, you realized the moment had come. The next movement, slow and inevitable, awaited only your surrender. The word now lingered like a breath suspended in the layer of thickened air that clung steadily to your skin. Your chest rose and fell, slow and measured, beneath the relentless mask. Each inhale, a fragile tether, anchoring you to the moment that stretched like a pale fog outside the wooden walls. The cold edge of lacquered wood bit deeper into your cheek, a silent reminder of the weight cradling your face and soul alike. Beyond the sealed door, time seemed to fold into itself. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, marked a soft rhythm, broken only by the subtle scrape of fabric or the faint brush of cloth against worn wood. The scent of iron had deepened, now entwined with the musty musk of rain-soaked timber and the fading warmth of sandalwood. It braided into the dampness that curled beneath the floorboards, wrapping around your bound limbs in a quiet embrace of inevitable change. Your fingers returned, almost instinctively, to the folds of your garment, tracing the worn silk with a reverence born from long hours held in stillness. Each crease slid beneath your touch like a whispered secret, the subtle tears and gentle repairs telling quiet stories only your fingertips remembered. The coarse threads whispered against your skin, a slow murmur pulling you back, grounding you in the ritual as the shadows deepened around you. A flicker of candlelight shimmered through the lattice, casting thin, wavering ribbons of gold that danced softly along the grain of the wooden walls. Shadows breathed at the edges of your vision, rising and falling in unison with your careful breaths. Outside, the drumbeat slowed, its rhythm a tender pulse vibrating faintly through your ribs, like the distant murmur of ocean waves folding against a forgotten shore. Your body shifted with painstaking slowness, the floorboards beneath the weight of your sandals creaking a muted note that threaded carefully through the heavy silence. The leather sleeves bit gently at your wrists, a dull pressure that kept your arms bound in quiet submission, soft chains tethering your movements to the slow march of time. Your skin prickled where the mask pressed harshly against your jaw, the rawness a dull ache that throbbed beneath the smooth wood. The room pulsed faintly with a chorus of soft whispers, voices carried on the breath of an invisible current, rising and folding like low waves, weaving through distant corridors. You felt their gaze, unseen, patient, unblinking, pressed against the thin barrier of your confinement, as if the very air around you held its breath, waiting for the next fold in the unfolding night. A delicate breeze slipped again through the narrow crack near the floor, carrying the cold kiss of wet earth, wrapped in subtle tendrils of smoke. It wove through the leather and silk bound to your skin, trailing a trace of quiet promise along your spine. Your heart thudded faintly beneath the mask's unyielding shell, each beat a distant drum echoing in the hollow cavity where your breath lived. You lifted your hand, fingers trembling despite the numbing chill, tracing the mask's polished curve, its coldness spreading like a silent river beneath your skin. The carved wood held stories older than memory itself, and you traced those lines as if touching the history of every still moment stacked inside this chamber. Your breath came slower now, falling into rhythm with the deepening drumbeat that seemed to anchor the very shadows around you. The door shifted slightly, a fraction of movement that sent a shiver through the stillness, stirring the air with the faintest whisper of disturbance. The light beyond moved with patient insistence, a narrow ribbon stretching across the floorboards, washing over their worn edges like spilled honey spilling slow and taut. The shadows retreated before it, curling tightly as if unwilling to surrender their hold. Your thoughts flickered briefly, a fragile flower opening in the dark, imagining soft rains on delicate petals, the distant roll of thunder blending with the sound of leaves whispered by the night wind. For a flickering moment, the weight that wrapped you felt lighter, the silk beneath your fingertips cool and soothing as water flowing over stones long forgotten. Step by careful step, you shifted the weight from one bound foot to the other, acutely aware of the rough surface beneath, the grooves worn perilously smooth from centuries of tentative motions like your own. Each movement was a slow negotiation with the invisible thread of control that bound body and spirit alike. The leather cuffs ate softly into your skin, reminding you of the delicate balance between endurance and collapse. The drumbeat softened once more, each strike expanding and fading like a breath held too long before release. The heavy scent of sandalwood flickered faintly, mingling with fresh pine and the sharp tang of iron that grew stronger, sharper still. The cold seeped in deeper, threading through every curve of your being, binding you to this slow descent into waiting and becoming. A slight sound brushed the threshold, a barely audible rustle of fabric drawn tight, a ghost of movement emerging from the enveloping dark. Your heart stumbled, thudding like a solitary bird's wings, beating softly against the walls of your chest. The mask's edge pressed with relentless insistence, a bite sharpened by time and trial. And then the word again, barely a breath, yet impossibly heavy. Now. Your breath caught, held fast beneath the brittle cage of mask and leather. The air thickened, the silence folding inward like a closing flower, closing around a secret, waiting just on the cusp of revelation. Beyond the door, the faintest flicker of lamplight dimmed as shadows swallowed the glow whole, a slow tide of darkness swelling forward. The footsteps halted momentarily, poised between retreat and advance, and you nestled deeper into the weight of your own stillness. In this fragile, suspended moment, every fiber of your being stretched taut, awaiting the slow unfurling of what must come next. Your senses brimmed with unseen expectation, the cold pressing softly against your skin, as if to whisper a final truth you were not yet ready to hear. And then, as the silence broke, like a whispered breath, a hand, steady and deliberate, reached toward the polished wood of your mask, the first motion that would shatter the long night's quiet. and opened the slow, unfolding door to what lay beyond. The chamber held its breath alongside you, the weight of centuries pressing into the grain of the walls and pooling in the silence that clung to your skin like a damp shroud. Your fingers, numb yet insistent, traced the silk folds of your costume once again, smoothing the delicate weave that curled against itself like a slow-moving wave. Each thread spoke of time past, silent rituals, and waiting, the long, deliberate journey of a night measured by soft pulses of breath and heartbeats. You shifted your bound wrists with painstaking slowness, the leather cuffs whispering against the rough fabric as if reluctant to release their grasp. The cold mask traced the curve of your cheek, a sharp edge licking at your nerves beneath the tight seal. Every pulse beneath your skin felt magnified within the silence. The faint scent of sandalwood mingled with the dampness creeping in from the floor's narrow cracks. The air cool and alive with the faint breath of rain-soaked earth beyond these walls. Outside, the drum's slow pulse carved rhythms into the shadowed night, each measured strike a slow throb that you felt deep in your chest, a metronome to the steady unraveling of time. Footsteps drifted softly through the hallways, the scrape of worn fabric marking a tentative approach, ghostly and deliberate. The house itself seemed to exhale, wood settling gently into the weight of what was to come. Folds of darkness gathering like a tide drawn inward. Your breath, light and shallow beneath the mask, echoed the drumbeat's slow cadence. The edges of your vision blurred slightly as you focused on the texture of the fabric beneath your fingertips. The shift of thread, the subtle stiffening of silk worn thin by ceremonies past. Each movement was a careful negotiation, with the heavy layers binding you, your senses stretched thin, alert to every softness and resistance. You dared to tilt your head just a fraction, feeling again the cold insistence of the carved wood edging your skin. The mask was a silent prisoner, just as much as you were, binding you to a stillness that was both shield and shackle. A faint flicker of candlelight seeped through the cracks of the wooden lattice, its golden tongue sliding slowly along the floorboards, chasing shadows backward until darkness recoiled, folding tightly into itself like a whispered secret. A quiet murmur floated from beyond the door, soft voices rolling in the heavy air, like a distant undercurrent of intent. The scent of sharp iron mingled with pine and wet moss, fresh and penetrating, making the dampness around you seem that much colder. Your heart pulsed irregularly, the steady drum faltering momentarily, replaced by a hovering stillness that pulled taut inside your chest. The floor beneath your feet groaned softly as you shifted your weight, sandal soles pressing slowly into the worn wood, leather pressed cold against your skin where it bound your limbs, biting with a sharp precision that sharpened your awareness. You smoothed the folds of your garment again, an old ritual echoed in slow, purposeful strokes, a silent chant woven with the thread of endurance. The pale gold of candlelight stepped forward, stretching across the boards with hesitant grace, pooling quietly before you like honey spilled in slow motion. Shadows drew themselves tight, curling and contracting. At the edges of this fragile light, trembling in tandem with your measured breaths, the fine dust in the air seemed to catch the light, drifting lazily, a slow rain of suspended particles caught in the hush. Your senses throbbed with anticipation as soft footsteps neared, the delicate scrape of fabric on wood threading through the thickening silence. Every shift, every shallow breath was etched sharply into the quiet, a dance of stillness and subtle motion. The weight of the mask pressed harder now, a cold press against your jawline, biting into your skin with the steady relentlessness of the night itself. Your fingers trembled as they reached out once more, touching the smooth carved wood as if seeking some tether to the world beyond the mask. The air between you and the door became charged, thick with an unspoken promise, folding the space between heartbeats into a fragile threshold. The drum slowed to a near whisper, a faint echo trailing into a deep void where time seemed to pause. A sudden inhalation of breath brushed the edges of your awareness, a ghost upon the shadows. The door shifted an inch more. A sliver of darkness peeled away to reveal the faintest glimmer, a hint of a figure poised in the half-light just beyond reach. The scent of rain and iron grew sharper, colder, pulling taut the fragile thread of your resolve. The moment hung suspended, balanced on the razor's edge of time, as the word came again, soft and heavy, slicing through the quiet like a whispered command. Now. The syllable pierced the stillness and wrapped itself around your spine, anchoring your body in place. Even as your mind braced for the slow unraveling of the night's long-held secret, the polished wood of the mask felt unbearably heavy now, a weight pressing down with ancient resolve. Outside, the candle flickered one last time before bowing to the gathering darkness, and footsteps advanced steadily, erasing all retreat beneath their measured cadence. Your breath caught, just as a hand, steady, deliberate, reached toward your face, the touch poised to break the fragile seal of your confinement. And in that moment, time fractured. The hand moved slowly, deliberate as a gentle tide reaching through murky water, and touched the cold wood of your mask. The fingers pressed lightly against the polished surface, then began to trace the carved lines with a reverence shaped by countless rituals before this one. You felt an echo stir beneath the lacquered shell, the ancient history woven into the grain, whispering silent farewells. Time stretched thin, fragile as a spider's silk thread spun between heavy beams, before the subtle pressure of the mask shifted. The footfalls outside softened and retreated, folding into the dissipating shadows, leaving you alone with a breathless stillness that now felt somehow softer, less like a prison, more like the closing of a long-held eyelid. Your bound wrists loosened slightly as unseen hands unfastened the leather cuffs. The quiet rustle, a gentle release that sent faint shivers climbing your arms. The layers of silk and sturdy fabric that had cocooned you, once a weight pressing deep into your flesh, now seemed to unravel with the patience of dawn, breaking slowly over an untouched countryside. You lifted your hands, tipping your head in the mask's embrace until it peeled away with a delicate creak, revealing skin flushed by cold and confinement, but alive, pulsing with breath unburdened. The air rushed in, cool and fragrant, with the lingering scent of sandalwood and rain-soaked earth, mingling with subtle traces of iron and incense that seemed to carry the ghosts of nights past. Outside, the drumbeat faded into the distance, a heartbeat slipping softly into silence. The shadows that had crowded the narrow chamber thinned and retreated like mist before morning light. Your eyes adjusted to the dim glow cast by lanterns balancing on slender supports, their flames flickering in quiet celebration of a night's end. You stood slowly, the floor creaking beneath bare feet that had grown numb but now warmed beneath the touch of cold wood. The heavy robes slipped from your shoulders like petals falling from a spent blossom, settling upon the floor as if releasing the past alongside them. From the doorway emerged figures, cloaked in fabrics, dyed deep with the hues of twilight, guardians of this ancient stage who had watched and waited through your ordeal. Their eyes held no judgment, only muted respect and understanding born from shared experience. One stepped forward, extending a hand, not commanding, but inviting you to join beyond the threshold of this long confinement. You inhaled deeply, filling lungs with the mingling scents of fresh pine and quiet rain, and took the tentative step into the corridor beyond. The wooden walls hummed faintly beneath your touch, a pulse of centuries folded into the grain that spoke of continuity and endurance. As you walked, the whispers of the gathered faded into a soft chorus of sighs, patience rewarded by presence, silence broken by the slow unraveling of tension. The world beyond the chamber was no longer distant or hostile, but an unfolding space, painted with the warm diffusion of paper lantern light and the gentle resonance of footfalls on worn floors. You glanced upward, where through the latticed ceiling the clouds parted just enough to reveal the moon's calm, watchful face. Its pale glow washed over the roof tiles like a benediction, a quiet guardian witnessing the closing of this long night and the promise of tomorrow's calm. The mask, once a cage of frozen breaths and silent shadows, was now a relic nestled gently in your hands. its cold edges smoothed by your touch, a silent companion of the trials past. You smiled softly, the first unguarded breath in hours, feeling the slow unfurling of a kiss hard-won and deeply deserved. Behind you, the chamber waited in stillness, the lingering scent of sandalwood mingling with memories carved deep in wood and cloth. Before you, the quiet world beckoned, a canvas untouched by haste or noise, brushed with the subtle colors of dawn. You stepped forward, unburdened, carrying within a fragile calm, born of endurance and ritual's quiet power. The night folded behind you like a whispered farewell, as the first light brushed soft against your skin, inviting dreams to rest easy and hearts to settle into stillness. And as the gentle pulse of the new day stirred outside, you felt it, the slow, steady certainty of beginnings born from endings, the warm embrace of cycles closing softly, carrying the promise of peace into the silent dawn.